Stand up right now and apologize to my son for your sabotage, or clean out your desk." Richard Thornfield's voice sliced through the boardroom like a knife, his finger aimed directly at me across the long mahogany table. The 15 board members and senior executives sat in complete silence, waiting to hear what I would say next. Austin Thornfield, Richard's 28-year-old son and our newly promoted operations director, sat beside the executive team with a smug smile on his face. My name is Nathan Bradley. I'm 52 years old, and that moment proved that my 18 years as senior engineering manager at Meridian Defense Solutions meant absolutely nothing to the Thornfield family. Let me go back and explain how this entire disaster began 6 months earlier. At that time, I managed the engineering department with a team of 12 experienced engineers. We specialized in manufacturing processes for defense contracts, and I knew every bolt, every specification, and every safety procedure by memory. After serving 8 years in the Navy and working my way up from the factory floor, I had earned respect through hard work and experience, not family connections. Then Richard hired his son, Austin. On his first day, Austin arrived in a brand new BMW M5, wearing a custom-made suit that cost more than most of my employees earned in a month. He had an MBA from Wharton and exactly 0 practical engineering experience. According to Richard, Austin had been brought in to modernize operations and introduce innovative cost management strategies to what he called an aging workforce. That was warning sign number 1. Still, I believed every owner's son deserved an opportunity to prove himself. "Nathan, you'll be mentoring Austin," Richard announced during a department meeting. "Show him our systems and procedures. He has some fresh ideas about improving efficiency." Austin's first fresh idea was cutting our materials testing procedures by 50% to speed up production schedules. When I explained that defense contracts required specific safety certifications and testing standards, he dismissed my concerns. "Look, Nate, I understand you're comfortable with traditional methods, but we need to embrace lean manufacturing principles. My father expects measurable improvements, not status quo thinking." That was the moment I realized we had a serious problem. This wasn't simply nepotism. This was dangerous nepotism being applied to military equipment manufacturing. The real trouble began 3 months later when we secured the Blackwater defense contract. Worth $200 million over 3 years, it was the largest deal in our company's 25-year history. The contract required manufacturing vehicle armor plating using 4,130 chromoly steel with specific heat treatment requirements and ballistic testing standards. Austin was assigned to lead the cost analysis phase while I handled the technical specifications. His first reports showed production costs that were 35% lower than my engineering estimates. When I questioned the numbers, he immediately became defensive. "Maybe you're not seeing the optimization opportunities here, Nate. I've identified several process improvements that could save millions while maintaining quality standards." That evening, I reviewed his analysis in detail. Austin had systematically replaced 4,130 chromoly steel specifications with 7075-T6 aluminum alloy, removed heat treatment cycles, and reduced ballistic testing from 3 samples per batch to a single sample per production run. These weren't process improvements. They were major alterations that would produce armor plating nearly 40% weaker than the contract required. "Austin, these changes violate basic metallurgy principles. Aluminum alloy cannot provide the ballistic protection that chromoly steel delivers. Soldiers could die if this equipment fails in combat." "That's your opinion," he replied. "My analysis shows aluminum can meet performance requirements while providing significant cost savings. My father agrees that we need to think strategically about profit margins." The next morning, I scheduled an emergency meeting with Richard. "Nathan, I appreciate your concerns, but Austin has identified legitimate opportunities for improvement. His projections show we can increase profit margins by 28% while delivering a product that satisfies all essential requirements." I spread the technical specifications across his desk. "Richard, these are not improvements. These are material substitutions that will fail Pentagon inspections and violate federal contract terms. We could face criminal fraud charges if we submit equipment that doesn't match approved specifications. Richard leaned back in his leather chair. I think you're being overly cautious. Austin has advanced business training from one of the best MBA programs in the country. He understands strategic considerations that pure engineering viewpoints might overlook. I stared at him. I understand that aluminum melts at around 1,220 degrees Fahrenheit, while chromoly steel maintains structural integrity until roughly 2,500 degrees. No MBA program changes the laws of physics. Richard's face immediately hardened. Nathan, I'm only going to say this once. Austin represents the future direction of this company. If you can't adapt to new methods, perhaps it's time to consider whether you're still the right fit for our evolving organization. The message was crystal clear. Accept Austin's dangerous changes or start looking for another job. Over the next 2 months, the situation escalated quickly. Austin began attending my engineering meetings without invitation, openly challenging my technical assessments in front of my team. He sent emails to Pentagon procurement officials with revised specifications while copying me as though I had approved the changes. When federal inspectors asked technical questions during site visits, Austin would defer to me for answers, and then later blame any confusion on my supposedly unclear communication style. 3 of my best engineers, Jordan Reed, Amanda Foster, and Charles Manning, requested transfers to other departments. Not because they had lost confidence in me, because Austin made it clear that anyone associated with employees who resisted his ideas would have limited opportunities for career advancement. My team shrank from 12 engineers to 9, while Austin's influence continued spreading throughout the company. The breaking point came during preparations for a major Pentagon compliance review scheduled for November 15th. I spent 2 weeks documenting exactly why Austin's material substitutions would compromise safety and violate contract specifications. The night before our presentation, I was working late when I heard voices coming from the main conference room. Dad, what happens if the Pentagon asks technical questions I can't answer tomorrow? Don't worry, Austin. I've already informed the procurement team that Nathan has been resistant to efficiency improvements. If any technical issues come up during the presentation, we'll present them as his failure to provide proper documentation support. I froze outside the conference room door and quietly activated the recording function on my phone. But what if they asked to see the original engineering specifications? Nathan's original specifications reflect outdated and overly conservative approaches that would make us less competitive. Your analysis proves we can meet all critical requirements while improving profitability. Trust me, after tomorrow's presentation, you'll be running this entire department. That conversation changed everything. This wasn't incompetence, it wasn't ordinary corporate politics, it was deliberate fraud, and they were preparing to destroy my career to protect themselves. It was time to fight back. The next morning, I began documenting absolutely everything. Every email, every meeting, every phone call, every conversation. I kept backup copies of all original engineering reports and compared them with Austin's modified versions. The differences were shocking. He had systematically altered material specifications, removed critical safety tests, and reduced inspection requirements across 23 separate contract items. The most dangerous change involved the vehicle armor plating. My original specifications required 4,130 chromoly steel with a Rockwell hardness of 28 to 32 HRC after heat treatment. Austin's version substituted 7075-T6 aluminum and completely removed hardness requirements. The aluminum would provide approximately 60% less ballistic protection than the required steel armor. If the equipment failed in combat, soldiers would pay the price. But technical documentation alone wasn't enough. I needed proof of criminal intent. The Pentagon compliance review was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Richard announced that Austin would present our cost analysis to the federal procurement team. I wasn't invited to attend. Austin will handle the technical presentation. Richard informed me during our Monday morning meeting. Your role is simply to provide documentation support if requested. I nodded calmly, but inside, I already knew their plan. They intended to present altered specifications as approved engineering documents. If federal inspectors discovered inconsistencies, Richard and Austin would point directly at me and claim I had failed to maintain proper records. What they didn't know was that I had already prepared for that possibility. Over the weekend, I had organized every original report, every revision history, every email chain, and every recorded conversation into a secure archive. I also contacted an old Navy friend who now worked as a compliance consultant for defense contractors. After reviewing the evidence, his reaction was immediate. Nathan, if what you're showing me is accurate, this isn't just a contract violation. This could trigger federal fraud investigations. That's exactly what I'm afraid of. Then make sure every piece of evidence is protected, because once this starts, people will try to make documents disappear. That warning stayed with me. Tuesday morning arrived faster than I expected. The federal procurement team arrived shortly before 9 o'clock. 5 representatives entered the conference room carrying laptops, contract files, and inspection reports. Austin looked confident. Richard looked relaxed. I was seated near the back wall with a stack of documentation beside me. The presentation began smoothly. Austin spoke confidently about cost reductions, efficiency gains, and production improvements. The board members nodded approvingly. Richard looked proud. Then one of the federal reviewers raised a hand. Can you explain the material substitution analysis used in the armor plating specifications? Austin smiled. Certainly. Our engineering department determined that alternative materials could achieve equivalent performance while reducing manufacturing costs. The reviewer looked down at her file. Interesting. Because the contract specifically requires 4,130 chromoly steel. Can you explain why the document submitted last month referenced 7075-T6 aluminum alloy? For the first time, Austin's confidence slipped. He glanced toward Richard. Richard immediately jumped in. There may have been some confusion during the documentation process. Nathan Bradley manages those technical records. And there it was, exactly as I had predicted. The first attempt to throw me under the bus. The reviewer turned toward me. Mr. Bradley, can you clarify the discrepancy? I slowly stood from my chair. Every person in the room looked at me. Richard seemed confident. Austin looked nervous. I opened my folder. Yes, I can clarify it. Then I placed 2 sets of documents on the conference table. One set contained my original engineering specifications. The other contained Austin's modified versions. Side by side, the differences were impossible to ignore. And for the first time in months, Richard Thornfield's confident expression began to disappear. Richard, the Pentagon team is going to ask detailed questions about metallurgy, stress analysis, and ballistic testing procedures. Austin doesn't have the engineering experience to handle those technical questions. He has my full confidence. That should be enough. I immediately understood what they were doing. They were setting Austin up to fail during the presentation and then planning to blame me for not providing adequate technical support. It was a classic scapegoat tactic. That evening, I stayed at the office late once again. Just as I expected, Richard and Austin were inside the conference room getting ready for Tuesday's presentation. I positioned myself outside the door and activated the recording app on my phone. Just follow the presentation outline, Richard was saying. If they ask technical questions that you can't answer, tell them Nathan was responsible for the engineering briefings but failed to provide complete documentation. What if they ask to review the original specifications? There are no original specifications. Nathan's analysis was incomplete and far too conservative for today's manufacturing standards. Your cost reduction study represents our official engineering position. I recorded every word. But something Eric Daniels from IT Security told me the following day made the entire situation far worse. "Nate, we need to talk. Not here in the office. Can you meet me at Murphy's Diner on Route 9 tonight at 8? Murphy's was a 24-hour truck stop about 15 miles from the office. When I arrived, Eric was already there, sitting in a corner booth with a laptop bag beside him and a worried look on his face. "We have a major problem," he said immediately. "Richard has been tracking your computer activity, your emails, and even your office phone calls. He's been building a surveillance file on you for the last 2 months. Eric opened his laptop and displayed a series of activity logs. My stomach sank as I saw how extensive the monitoring really was. Every document I had opened, every email I had sent, every phone call made from my office. Extension. Everything had been logged and cataloged. How is this even legal? Technically, the company can monitor activity on its own equipment. But here's the part that really concerns me. Austin Thornfield has done exceptional work improving our processes and identifying cost savings across multiple contracts. Unfortunately, some senior staff members have been resistant to these improvements." Austin smiled proudly from his seat beside the executive team, still convinced his father could control the situation. "Before we discuss Austin's promotion to engineering director, I want to address the federal investigation. This audit resulted from complaints by a disgruntled employee who disagreed with management decisions." Patricia spoke from across the table. "Richard, are you referring to Nathan Bradley's technical concerns regarding specification violations?" "I'm referring to Nathan's inability to adapt to modern engineering practices and his attempts to undermine Austin's legitimate improvements." "Those aren't improvements," I said as I stood up. "They're dangerous modifications that violate federal contract terms and safety requirements." I connected my tablet to the room's display system. "I believe this evidence will clarify what actually happened." What I showed them was devastating. Side-by-side comparisons of original specifications and Austin's modifications. Reduced material strength, eliminated safety testing, compromised ballistic protection standards. Every change violated both contract requirements and fundamental engineering principles. These modifications were made without my approval and submitted to Pentagon procurement under my name as the reviewing engineer. Austin jumped to his feet. "Those are preliminary efficiency studies. Nathan approved all final optimizations after our engineering reviews." "Actually," I said while activating the audio file on my phone, "that's not what you told your father." Austin's voice filled the boardroom. "Dad, what happens if the Pentagon asks technical questions I can't answer?" Then Richard's unmistakable voice followed. "Don't worry, Austin. I've already briefed them that Nathan has been resistant to efficiency improvements. If there are technical issues, we'll frame them as his failure to provide adequate support." The room became completely silent. Board members stared at Richard in disbelief. "Those recordings are illegal and taken out of context," Richard said, his composure finally beginning to break. "No," said a voice from the back of the room. "They're evidence of a conspiracy to commit fraud." Inspector Williams entered with 2 federal agents. "We've completed our preliminary review. Mr. Thornfield, Mr. Austin Thornfield, and Ms. Madison Thornfield, you are under arrest for conspiracy to defraud the United States government." What happened next was fast and decisive. Federal agents secured all company computers, phones, and records. Richard and Austin were handcuffed and escorted out while Madison collapsed into her chair, finally realizing that her father could not protect her from federal prosecutors. Patricia approached me as the agents completed their evidence collection. "The board will need immediate leadership for the engineering department. Are you interested in the position you should have received years ago?" 3 months later, I'm sitting in what used to be Richard's office, reviewing specifications for upgraded ballistic testing equipment. The Blackwater contract was renegotiated with proper materials and realistic safety margins. Our engineering team expanded from 9 engineers to 16, all hired because of competence rather than family connections. Richard pleaded guilty to federal fraud charges and received 4 years in federal prison, along with $7.5 million in fines and restitution. Austin was permanently banned from government contracting and faced multiple civil lawsuits from affected military units. Madison lost her security clearance and accepted a plea agreement in exchange for probation and cooperation. The real victory wasn't their punishment. The real victory was rebuilding trust with Pentagon procurement and proving that experienced engineering judgment matters more than MBA cost-cutting theories. Eric was promoted to Chief Information Officer and implemented comprehensive cybersecurity protocols throughout the company. Patricia joined the board as chairperson, ensuring proper executive oversight and accountability. Most importantly, we now hire veterans, community college graduates, and state university engineers who understand that military equipment isn't about maximizing profit margins. It's about bringing soldiers home safely. If you've ever dealt with workplace nepotism or corrupt management, document everything and find allies who value integrity over politics. Sometimes fighting a broken system requires taking risks that privileged people will never understand. Experience often matters more than credentials when lives depend on your work. And sometimes doing the right thing means standing up to people who believe family connections are more important than professional competence. That's my story. Nathan Bradley, Senior Vice President of Engineering at Meridian Defense Solutions. Still here. Still fighting for quality over shortcuts. Still making sure our equipment performs when it matters most. Because, in the end, integrity is not just a principle. It's a responsibility.